Hello, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed chapter 21 because it was pretty good, right? Right. God's word is good, right? Yes. So if you haven't read chapters 22 and 23 for today, please go ahead and do that. Again, I'll be here when you get back. But if you haven't, please do that. So this stuff makes sense. In chapters 22 and 23, we see Matthew talk a lot about the Pharisees and Sadducees, right? And who are these people? Like, do they really have any power? And the answer is yes. The Pharisees and Sadducees were actually experts of the law. They memorized a lot of God's word, the Old Testament, and all the rules and commandments that God had given his people. And they could tell people how to interpret those and how to apply those in their lives, right? But the Pharisees and Sadducees really didn't like Jesus. They felt threatened by him, and so they tried to trick him a lot. And in chapters 22 and 23, we see that in both of those chapters. And so the Pharisees, they try and trick Jesus. The Sadducees, they do it too. And they ask him these questions that are kind of specific, but they could trap him, and then if Jesus answers in the wrong way, they can basically arrest him and punish him, right? But Jesus knows, right? And Jesus doesn't fall into their traps. And he tries to teach even the Pharisees and Sadducees about what God's love is about. And so even after he's being tricked in chapter 22, Jesus takes a moment to try and teach them what's up. And so we see that in the fourth section, where it says the most important commandment. And we've been over this many times, and we're supposed to be living this out, right? The first and greatest commandment is to love God, and the second one is to love your neighbor, right? And Jesus, the Pharisees and Sadducees tried and trick him, and they ask him, what is the most important commandment in the law? And Jesus doesn't refer to anything that was given to Moses in the Ten Commandments, but he says in verse 37, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Love him with all your mind. And the second one is like it in verse 39, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Everything that is written in the law and the prophets is based on those two commandments. Guys, this is super important for us to remember. Jesus is not about just keeping all these rules and regulations that the Pharisees and Sadducees had memorized. It's not about being strict and having a right and wrong answer every single time, and not loving people and not loving God through those things. But it's really about learning how to love. And in chapter 23, we see Jesus rebuke. He basically says, hey, you guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be living lives like this. And he tells the crowds of people around them, don't do what the Pharisees and Sadducees are doing. You're supposed to live a life of love. And in verse 11 of chapter 23, it says the most important, what? The most what? Well, I can't speak. The most important person among you will be your servant. Anyone who lifts himself up will be brought down, and anyone who is brought down will be lifted up. Guys, does that sound familiar? Absolutely, it should. We talked about this on Sunday, right? Jesus had the heart of a servant, and he came to serve and not be served. And Jesus is trying to teach that to all of the people and the Pharisees and Sadducees, that you need to have the heart of a servant. You need to love. You need to love God, and you need to love others. And so in this, Jesus again shows beautiful fruit of being patient and gentle and kind with the Pharisees and Sadducees. He doesn't yell at them. He doesn't kick them out. He doesn't say, hey, you guys are the worst. Get out of my face. He says, basically, hey, you need to learn how to love. And this is how you do it. You love God, and you love your neighbors, and you have a servant heart. So keep that in mind as you keep reading in the next chapters, because we're going to see Jesus, again, show by example and show with his actions what love is. I hope you're ready for the rest of the week, because it's going to be a doozy. All right, today was pretty easy. I know it was a little bit long, but I believe in you. Keep answering the questions. I explained a little bit more in detail in our packet what Pharisees and Sadducees, who they were. So if you have questions about that, again, ask me. And if you have any questions about the word that you read today, let me know. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow.